You know that feeling, that bone-deep weariness that hits you, even when things seem to be going incredibly well.
Hmm.
Maybe you've just crushed a big project, landed that dream opportunity, or navigated huge positive life changes. Everything's amazing on the outside, genuinely good, and yet you just feel utterly spent.
Yeah, it's confusing, isn't it?
Right. We often think tiredness is just, well, the consequence of struggle or failure.
And that's the paradox. We expect exhaustion during difficulties, sure, but intense periods of growth or success, or even just big transitions, they demand their own kind of energy. They can leave you just as depleted.
Yeah.
It really highlights that weariness isn't only a signal that things are going wrong.
Absolutely. And that very idea is right in the heart of the source material we've been looking into. It takes this perspective rooted in Christian thought to sort of unpack this deep need for rest. It looks at tiredness not just as a physical state, but as something that can actively work against us, almost like an internal resistance.
Yeah, the source presents tiredness as a potential saboteur. And our mission in this deep dive is really to get into that.
Okay.
What does this material actually reveal about how tiredness affects us, how it can undermine us even when things are good, and what finding true, meaningful rest looks like in this context?
Let's jump in then. The speaker in our source material, they're very open about it, sharing that they recently experienced this significant tiredness themselves.
Right, even while navigating massive positive changes.
Exactly. A new baby, expanding their ministry into new cities, seeing incredible growth. I mean, by any external measure, things were booming, successful.
Yeah,
But internally, that weariness was profound.
and that sets up the core point perfectly.
Yeah.
Tiredness isn't reserved for the hard times. It can be a real challenge when you're actually experiencing momentum, when you're in this season of breakthrough and growth.
And here's a key insight from the source that really struck me. It suggests that when external attacks against you fail, when opposition or circumstances don't stop your progress, one tactic that can emerge is confusion and sabotage.
And this, the source argues, often works from within. Tiredness, in this view, can be an entry point for that internal undermining.
That's a powerful distinction, the threat coming from the inside. The source even touches on being active in a community, say a church, being part of that collective energy.
Yeah, you feel the buzz.
Right, but not necessarily experiencing personal vitality or living out your unique purpose within it. The point is made that while that collective movement is important, true, lasting growth often really relies on individual inner strength and vitality.
So you can be surrounded by all this activity, feel the heat, as it were, of things happening.
Yeah.
But if you're depleted internally, if you're just kind of going through the motions, that external energy doesn't automatically translate into personal strength.
Exactly, or purpose. It's activity without that true internal engagement. And tiredness, from this perspective, is a primary indicator of this internal depletion. It shows up in specific detrimental ways.
Okay.
The source breaks down 4 key ways tiredness can sabotage you. All right, let's get into how tiredness does its work internally. The first way.
Tiredness tries to steal your joy.
Right. Okay, think about that. Unlike external things that might steal your joy, like a hurtful word or a difficult situation, tiredness starts inside you. It's an internal erosion, often subtle at first, which makes it particularly insidious because it's hard to spot as an external attack. It's almost like you working against yourself.
And this connects directly to a really powerful point the source makes about auto-sabotage.
Auto-sabotage!
We are often far more effective at stopping our own progress and well-being than any external obstacle or adversary could ever be. Really.
The source gives some pretty stark examples to illustrate this internal battle. It points to statistics around self-inflicted harm.
Yeah, like suicide rates often being higher than murder rates, or deaths linked to obesity surpassing those from starvation. Now, these are presented as vivid, though extreme illustrations of just how potent that internal fight against ourselves can be. And within the spiritual framework of the source, even positive-seeming external strategies, like coaching or self-help methods, while they can have potential,
Sure, yeah.
they can actually become a form of auto-sabotage if they subtly replace a reliance on faith or, on God. The caution is about where your ultimate trust really lies.
This perspective also leads to a fascinating redefinition of prosperity. It's not just about having things, money, blessings, success,
Right.
but crucially, it's about the internal capacity to actually enjoy and make good use of what you have.
Yes. The anecdote about the millionaire client is so illustrative here.
Tell us about that.
Well, imagine someone with vast financial resources, objectively wealthy.
Why?
Right, but living in constant fear of poverty, renting just a single room, driving an old car, completely unable to spend or enjoy their fortune.
Wow. So they had the resources.
They had the resources, but their internal state, that deep-seated fear and that lack of inner rest, it completely prevented them from experiencing any real prosperity or enjoyment of their wealth.
That story really paints a clear picture. And the connection to tiredness is that it can leave you so depleted internally that you lose the very capacity to enjoy the good things that are right there in front of you.
Exactly. It hinders your ability to live as a good steward. And stewardship, in this context, isn't just managing resources efficiently. It's about having access to incredible abundance. The source uses the image of royalty having access to the king's treasury.
Okay.
Recognizing it all belongs to God, but having the internal capacity to enjoy and use what he's provided. Tiredness robs you of that capacity for enjoyment and effective stewardship.
So tiredness steals joy, limits our ability to enjoy blessings.
Got it?
What's the second way it sabotages us, according to the source?
Tiredness makes you easily offended.
The short fuse. Yes, I think we can all relate to that one.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The source explains this by saying tiredness weakens our self-control. Those less desirable characteristics that we normally manage or keep in check, irritability, impatience, taking things too personally, they tend to surface when we're tired. The example given is fasting. If you feel irritable during a fast, the fast isn't necessarily creating irritability. The physical strain might just be revealing an existing tendency that your usual self-control had masked. Tiredness acts in a similar way. It just reduces your capacity to manage those internal reactions.
And the source makes a really crucial distinction here, one that feels very practical. The difference between being a victim and becoming a vitimista.
Yes, that's a key concept.
Yeah.
Being a victim is a circumstance, something genuinely difficult or wrong happens to you. It's real.
Right.
But becoming a vitimista is presented as a chosen mindset. It's a decision to adopt self-pity and live from that place of being wronged, allowing it to define you.
And the source uses several really powerful biblical figures to highlight this difference. Can you walk us through those?
Absolutely. First, there's Joseph, the one with the coat of many colors.
Yeah, son of Jacob.
Right.
Yeah.
He was definitely a victim. His own brothers betrayed him, sold him into slavery. A truly terrible wrong was done to him.
Absolutely.
But he didn't become a vitimista. He persevered through that betrayal, through unjust imprisonment, and ultimately rose to this position of immense power in Egypt, even saving his family. He didn't let the wrong define him or keep him down.
Incredible story.
Then there's Daniel. He served in the Babylonian and Persian empires. He was a victim of political and religious persecution. His enemies conspired to have him thrown into a den of lions just because he prayed to God.
Right.
But again, he didn't become a vitimista. He maintained his faith, his integrity, his voice, even facing death. And God delivered him.
Amazing.
And of course, Jesus himself is presented as the ultimate example. He was a victim of betrayal by one of his closest followers, Judas, a victim of religious opposition, an unjust trial, crucifixion.
The ultimate victim, really.
In human terms, yes. Yet, he didn't adopt that victim mindset. He walked with purpose towards the cross and ultimately triumphed over death, fulfilling God's plan. And the source also briefly touches on Peter, one of Jesus' main disciples. He stumbled terribly by denying Jesus 3 times. That was a definite fall.
A huge failure.
Huge. But he didn't stay down. He repented, he was restored, and that connects to the broader theme about not having to remain in a state of defeat, which we'll probably get to later.
It's striking how these figures faced immense suffering, real injustice. They were genuinely victims of circumstance, but they chose not to live from that mindset of self-pity or permanent defeat.
Exactly.
The source also points out how, negative words spoken against us, maybe from parents or spouses or betrayals in the past, how those can create lasting hurt and sensitivity.
Yes, it acknowledges that reality, but it has this really profound perspective that within God's larger, often mysterious plan, even acts of betrayal like Judas betraying Jesus could paradoxically clear the way for something greater. Well, in that specific case, it led to Jesus' sacrifice, which brought about God's ultimate plan of redemption and favor. It suggests that what seems purely destructive on the surface can sometimes be interwoven into a larger redemptive story. It's like a complex idea.
Yeah, that's deep. Okay, bringing this back to tiredness, when you're internally depleted, all that past hurt, present difficulty, that tendency towards irritability, It just feels magnified, doesn't it?
Totally. Everything seems uniquely challenging, almost like it's targeted specifically at you.
Right.
And this often surfaces in relational offense. The source uses a really relatable example. Someone feeling hurt and maybe leaving a community like a church because they felt neglected. Say the pastor didn't call them during a difficult time.
I bet I could see that happening.
Sure, but the source then poses the challenging question. Did you reach out? It introduces this idea that our complaints can often subtly highlight our own personal calling.
Whoa, that's a powerful reframing. So if you see a need for care or connection and you feel upset that it's not being met, maybe that feeling isn't just a complaint, but a signal that you are actually called to be part of the solution, to provide that care.
Exactly that. You can become the solution you wish to see. Tiredness can kind of blind you to this possibility, making you fixate on being offended by what's lacking instead of seeing the opportunity for you to step in and contribute.
Wow. Okay. I really need to ask for your help here for a second. If you're finding this chat helpful, please share it with someone, leave a like, and subscribe for more content like this. And maybe leave a positive word in the comments. It really helps. Okay, sorry for the interruption. Let's get back. This idea connects to relationships, you were saying.
Yes, directly to the source's view on relational wellness, especially within marriage. The perspective offered is that often unresolved individuals carry these internal voids, these unmet needs, and they unconsciously expect their partner to fill them, which leads, inevitably, to constant disappointment and easy offense when those unrealistic expectations aren't met. Because no human can really do that.
Right.
So marriage, from this viewpoint, isn't about two incomplete people trying to complete each other.
That's the romantic ideal often portrayed.
It is, but the source envisions it differently, as two whole individuals, ideally finding their completeness in their relationship with God first, coming together not out of desperate need, but to overflow together.
Overflow together, I like that.
Yeah. That internal completeness significantly reduces the desperate need for the other person to be something they simply can't be, which in turn minimizes the tendency to get offended when they inevitably fall short.
Wow. Okay. So tiredness steals joy, makes us easily offended. What's the third characteristic?
Tiredness makes you lose peace.
Okay. The source talks about experiencing a peace that exceeds understanding. That phrase always stands out. This isn't a peace that comes from having everything figured out, is it?
No, not at all. In fact, the source argues it's often the opposite. This kind of divine peace frequently requires letting go of our need to fully comprehend God's plans or our current, often confusing circumstances.
So peace isn't the absence of confusion. It's a state you can maintain despite not understanding everything.
Precisely. The source uses a military analogy, which I think is helpful.
Okay.
If a soldier receives an order from a superior officer, they hold that order until a new one comes. Regardless of changing circumstances on the battlefield, unexpected difficulties, or even their own lack of complete understanding of the bigger picture.
Right. You follow the order.
You follow the order. Applied to faith, if you feel God has given you a word, a promise, a direction, you hold on to that. You don't stop or abandon it simply because you don't understand the timing or how it will work out or because things aren't unfolding the way you expected. Tiredness can erode that resolve, leading to internal unrest and that loss of peace.
That makes sense. And finally, the fourth characteristic the source identifies.
Tiredness makes you give up easily.
This feels like the natural conclusion of the other points, doesn't it? If your joy is stolen, you're easily offended, you've lost your peace. Well, throwing in the towel starts to look pretty tempting.
It really does. It directly contributes to abandoning significant commitments, whether that's in a marriage, a career, a calling, a long-term goal. But the source offers a crucial alternative here.
Which is?
When you're tired, you don't necessarily need to quit. What you need is rest.
And this isn't just about getting more sleep, right? Though physical rest is definitely part of it.
Absolutely part of it. But the source mentions different kinds of rest. Physical, yes, but also mental, emotional, and crucially, resting in God. This means doing your part, taking the actions you can, making wise decisions, but then truly releasing the outcome, trusting Him completely to do His part. It's not passive idleness, it's active trust and reliance. As the source references, a principle of Scripture is commit your way to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will do this.
The example used about potentially losing a building or a contract, that illustrates this well.
Yes. The source presents a choice in that situation. You can lament what was lost, focusing all your energy on something that's now genuinely out of your control.
Which is draining in itself.
Totally draining. Or you can choose to put your energy into what you can influence, maybe declaring faith for a new space, actively working towards a new solution. Tiredness pushes you towards the lamenting, the feeling of defeat, the giving up.
Whereas rest, particularly resting in God, empowers you to focus differently.
Exactly. While it's framed in faith, the practical principle is powerful for anyone. Don't drain your limited energy focusing on what you can't change. Instead, channel it into empowered action and, in this context, declaring what you believe is possible and desirable.
Right.
This ties back to the source's perspective on faith itself. It's not just acknowledging what you see right now, that's just natural vision.
Seeing is believing.
Right. But faith, in this view, involves declaring what you desire to see into existence. It requires a different kind of vision, a supernatural one perhaps.
This deep dive has really highlighted how the source sees rest, not just as, a reaction to being exhausted, but as something much more foundational. It brings in the biblical account of creation here.
Yes, and makes a really profound point. God rested on the seventh day after creating humanity. Now, God isn't finite. He wasn't tired.
Right.
He established rest as a principle for us. The intention, the source suggests, was that we would live from a place of rest rooted in his completed work and provision, not just rest because we've completely worn ourselves out.
That fundamentally reframes rest, doesn't it? It makes it a deliberate choice, part of God's design for living well, rather than merely a necessity when depletion forces you to stop.
Absolutely. And the source underscores this with a comforting promise found in Psalm 37, verses 23 and 24. It says something like, "The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholds him with his hand."
That's a beautiful image. It acknowledges that getting tired, stumbling, even falling, that's a common human experience. The source isn't suggesting you'll never feel weak or tired.
Not at all.
But that verse, and this whole perspective, says you don't have to stay down there. Tiredness or stumbling doesn't have to be a permanent state of defeat.
Exactly. Which leads naturally to a message of hope and perseverance. The source brings in that principle from the New Testament, 2 Corinthians 12, where the Apostle Paul is told God's grace is sufficient and his strength is made perfect in weakness.
So when you feel weakest or most tired?
That can be precisely when his strength is most evident and available to you. It's an opportunity in a way.
It also encourages that idea, drawn from Scripture, of putting your hand to the plow once you've committed to a path or a calling. Don't keep looking back or give up easily, even when it gets really hard.
Yes, and the story of the woman with the issue of blood who suffered for 12 long years, spent all her money on doctors.
A classic story of desperation.
Total desperation. Yet she was tired, she was weak, but she persevered through that crowd, believing that simply touching the hem of Jesus' garment would bring healing. And it did.
Wow.
She was healed instantly.
Wow.
The source connects this to the idea that so many people give up just before their breakthrough. They've endured, they've persevered for so long, and the very thing they've been hoping for, praying for, was just steps away.
That's heartbreaking to think about.
It is. And, a modern secular parallel, you used briefly in the source, is that famous story of the guy who paid for pizza with a huge amount of Bitcoin way back when it was basically worthless.
Oh, yeah, I remember hearing about that. Worth millions now.
Exactly. Now, the source is very clear. This is not financial advice. It's used purely as an analogy for the principle of not abandoning something that might seem insignificant or struggling right now, because you just might be closer to a significant shift than you realize. The core message is about the power of not giving up too soon.
Understood. Well, this deep dive has given us so much to think about. Looking at tiredness not just as physical fatigue, but as something with this genuine potential to sabotage our joy, our peace, our relationships, and even our ability to persevere. We've explored how it can steal your joy from the inside out, how it reveals and amplifies irritability, making you easily offended.
Yeah, and how it leads to losing peace by making it hard to trust when you don't understand everything.
And ultimately how it makes you want to abandon your commitments, just give up.
But the source offers such a powerful counterpoint, presenting rest not merely as something you do only when you hit empty,
Right.
but as a fundamental principle for living, established by God right from the beginning. It's a choice to live from a place of his strength and provision.
It's a reminder then that even when you stumble or feel weak, you don't have to stay down, because his strength is available to uphold you.
Exactly. It's ultimately a message of hope. That feeling weak can actually be an opening for something greater to be revealed, and that perseverance, even when you feel completely depleted, might lead you right to the edge of your breakthrough.
So maybe let's leave you, the listener, with this thought to carry with you this week.
Yeah.
Consider where in your life tiredness might be subtly working against you right now. Perhaps dimming your joy, making you react more quickly than usual, or maybe just whispering that it's finally time to give up on something important. And then thinking about rest as this active principle, not just a last resort. What is one small intentional choice you could make today or this week to embrace a moment of true rest? Not just because you're tired, but maybe as an act of faith, an act of trust.